Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining in. Welcome to our webinar, How eSIM is Shaping Consumer Usage and What It Means for Mobile Operators. So, in today's world, where staying connected is more important than ever before, eSIM technology is making a big impact. Over the past few years, it has changed the way people use their devices and how mobile operators are providing their services. From making it easier to stay connected while traveling to letting consumers connect with multiple devices with one plan, eSIM is just more than a new feature. It's driving big changes in the telecom industry. In this session, we will talk about how eSIM is changing consumer habits, its growing use in devices, and the opportunities it offers to mobile operators. Whether you are a telecom professional, a device manufacturer, or simply curious about the future of mobility and connectivity, today's webinar will provide valuable insights to you in this rapidly evolving space. My name is Mohit Agarwal. I am a research director at Counterpoint Research, and I lead the AI, IoT, and the eSIM practice. Counterpoint is a leading industry research firm that covers wide range of technologies, starting from smartphones, eSIM, semiconductors, cloud, IoT, and many more. And I'm excited to be joined by two eSIM experts today, who together we will dive into this important topic. So we have with us Sylvain Givord, who is eSIM product manager at IDEMIA Secure Transactions. And I have to mention one thing about IDEMIA Secure Transactions. So IDEMIA was rated as a pace setter in Counterpoint's eSIM rankings across enablement, provisioning, and orchestration. So pace setters are companies that have best-in-class platform features as well as they have the best execution in the market. Additionally, Silver and I are joined with Mitch Fodham, who is the co-founder and chief commercial officer at eSIM-Go. eSIM-Go empowers businesses to offer their own digital connectivity solutions to customers. So with that, let's come to the agenda of the day. So we'll start with short presentation from the three of us to give you a perspective on the topic. The presentations will be followed by a panel discussion and then the Q&A. But please feel free to add your questions anytime during the webinar. So you can click on the chat button or the Q&A button over there and put your question out there. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. So what I'm going to do is in the next few minutes, I'll give a short presentation on Counterpoint's perspective on growth of eSIM in the consumer space. So I'll talk about numbers and statistics that will set the tone for the rest of the presentations. So to give you some numbers, if you look at since the launch of eSIM-only iPhone in the US, which was around 2 years back, the eSIM adoption has really taken off. So if you look at the total number of eSIM consumer devices that were shipped last year, they crossed 300 million units, and it was a growth of 12%. And because of the increasing eSIM device shipments, a large number of operators have started to support eSIM. And last year alone, there was an increase of 55% in terms of the number of operators supporting eSIM. So as a result of this rapid growth, there are now over 400 operators across 110 countries. And more importantly, we have over 900 million consumer eSIM devices as an installed base across the globe. So that is where the huge opportunity lies, wherein 900 million, and this is at the end of 2023. If we were to include 2024, it is well over a billion consumer devices out there in the market. If we look at the chart on the right side, it shows the eSIM readiness of different networks across the globe. Uh, right now, if you look at the Western markets as well as Australia, that is a little more advanced compared to the developing countries, but the opportunities are definitely there across the globe in terms of the eSIM readiness. Uh, Last month, Counterpoint commissioned a survey across 7 markets, mostly in the Western countries, which is US, Canada, Japan, France, Germany, and Poland. And we also included Japan in Asia. So across these markets, we commissioned an eSIM survey. And what we found was that only 35% of the consumers are really aware of eSIM. And it was a pretty large survey. Some 25,000 people were contacted for this survey, and only 35% was the was the number of was the awareness, and that shows that there is still a lot that needs to be done in order to increase the awareness amongst the people. And most of this awareness was also coming in from people who were already owning devices which are eSIM ready. And more importantly, if you look at it, out of these 35% people who are aware, only 39% were actually using eSIM. This means 60% of the people were still not using eSIM despite being aware of it or having devices that are eSIM ready. And that shows that there is still hesitancy amongst people when it comes to the usage of eSIM. One of the big use case for eSIM is companion devices. And here it was heartening to see that almost 2 out of 5 respondents were using eSIM on companion devices. And over a third of the respondents were using eSIM on multiple devices. So this is a good use case, and that's where I think there is a lot of opportunity that is there for the operators to increase their ARPU. Then another use case, which is pretty much well talked about in the industry, is travel. In fact, for many people, the first use of eSIM is on a travel use case. And there, in our survey, we found that 61% of the people who used eSIM or who are using eSIM have also used it for travel. This means it is more about awareness and usage, and then once they start using it, they use it for multiple use cases. And the top reasons for adopting eSIM for travel was to lower the cost, better coverage because they were able to get more geographies, or they were able to get more networks. And convenience was another factor for adopting eSIM, because then people do not have, they are ready with connectivity right after the moment they get off the plane. And the top barriers to adopt eSIM was low consumer awareness. Again, it's a paradox because that's their overall when we look at the top reasons to adopt also. So low consumer awareness and perceived high cost, and the compatibility constraints that are there. But again, people who used it really found it very useful. So 87% of the respondents who used eSIM for travel found that the eSIM technology overall is important or very important. So they really like eSIM technology once they start using it. So those are some of the numbers that I wanted to share before I hand it over to Sylvain, who will give his perspective on the strategies that the mobile operators should adopt for eSIM. So over to you, Sylvain.
Thank you very much, Mohit, and hello to everyone around the call. Well, today we're going to show how eSIM is going to change the world of connectivity, let's say. Show how it's going to change the way normal people, you and me, get purchase connectivity, and how it's going to impact the telecom ecosystem as a whole. So if we can switch to the next slide, please, Mohit. I guess some of you might be thinking, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, eSIM has been there forever. It hasn't changed much so far. Why would it be any different in the future? And yes, indeed, eSIM has been there for quite a while. You have GSMA documents published on eSIM in 2013. And in a decade, a lot has happened in the eSIM world. The specifications have evolved a lot, dozens of eSIM-capable device models, and millions of people now using eSIM on a daily basis. And still, it hasn't really changed the core use cases and the core connectivity offer yet. And today, in most cases, eSIM is used to get connectivity in use cases and sales channels that have been existing for ages. And actually, one may not even know that an eSIM is used in some cases. So this is our starting point. eSIM is not a revolution, but we firmly believe it's an evolution, a major evolution that is only just starting to transform the telecom ecosystem. And that in 10 years from now, we're going to look back at how things were done in 2024 and think, wow, this has changed. And we believe this because we've seen similar things happening in other markets because of what eSIM enables, both in terms of new use cases and backend transformation, and because there are very clear signs from the market. So we will look at those 3 points, and then we will see how mobile operators can get prepared. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Mohit. Thank you. So looking at analogies, when we think disruptive innovation, the obvious examples that come to our minds often seem to appear from one day to the next. So first of all, of course, there are often years of hidden research and development before adoption. A typical example of AI, decades of study of AI, neural networks, deep learning, LLMs, before you get a chat GPT that then changes your life in a few months. And then there are also cases where the adoption simply doesn't happen overnight. And here we would like to take the example of the banking industry. Banking industry has been experiencing a big shift towards digital with innovations such as mobile banking, which is simply managing your bank account from your mobile, contactless payments, soft point of sales, where the merchant uses the smartphones as a payment terminal, to name just a few of those innovations. And sometimes for some of those innovations, it took years. For contactless payments, for instance, once the technology was ready, there was then the need to equip the market with devices supporting the technology. So in the banking case, those are payment terminals. And in the eSIM case, those are smartphones. Then there was the need to equip the end users with the right banking cards, and then to educate the end users on the new way to use. So in the contactless payment, you can pay by tapping. In the eSIM, you can get connectivity by scanning a QR code, for instance. And back to banking, at the beginning, the usage was quite low on contactless payments. Customers were not used to it. Merchants were not used to it until it gradually became the new normal with a big acceleration during the COVID pandemic. And here it's a kind of a pattern to often have external events acting as a catalyst for the change. And then once paying by tapping is widely accepted, then new use cases are possible. Pay with your phone, pay with your watch, and overall the digitization of the physical banking card. So this example is one part of a more global digital transformation of the banking ecosystem that has changed the relationship between the banks and their customers, that has brought plenty of new actors, Apple, Google, Samsung, Venmo, Blue Code, Stripe, SumUp, etc., and that has forced traditional actors to review their positioning, often by creating full digital brands. Well, if we move to the next slide, we believe that eSIM is actually one part of a digital transformation of the telecom ecosystem. And as said in the introduction, at the beginning, most end users are using eSIM to do exactly what they used to do before with physical SIMs. No change in the existing habits. Purchase a subscription in a point of sales, purchase online, but without really thinking about the form factor. Just the experience is slightly different. Typically online, the activation is real time versus I used to have to wait for a parcel delivery with my SIM. And that builds up intimacy and confidence in the journey and in the technology until it becomes the new normal and then open doors to this whole set of new use cases. I can subscribe directly from my device with a full digital onboarding. I can use eSIM next time I travel. And in the survey presented by Mohit just before, 61% of the respondents having already used eSIM then also used it for travel. So a very good example. I can connect more devices. I can connect my watch, my tablet, my car. I will take action next time I see a QR code in a stadium It also makes it easier to bring my own device and my company. And we can't hide from this. It's also easier for prepaid subscribers to change connectivity providers and to switch more often. So altogether, it brings much more fluidity for the end user. And then on the backend side, for mobile operators and for connectivity providers as a whole, here the opportunity is to completely get rid of SIM card storage and distribution, which means cost reduction, very valid, doing better, more efficiently, the same we used to do before. But also this great logistics simplification makes it much easier for new players to enter the connectivity market. And we'll see more of that later in the webinar. Okay, so moving to next slide. If we look now at the market, after years of maturation, we have very clear signals supporting the fact that eSIM is here for real. To name just a few, well, the eSIM-only iPhones in the US, 3 years in a row, the investment of the whole industry, and especially device makers, in improving the end-user experience on the device change use case, for instance. The mobile operators massively adopting the technology, the travel industry recovering post-COVID and widely adopting the eSIM, and all this together, in terms of transactions, in terms of eSIM downloads, well, it's been doubling every year for the past 3 years. So that's exponential growth. And that shows clearly that eSIM is not a concept anymore. It's happening. It's happening now. So to that, and moving to next slide, how can mobile operators get prepared for this? And thinking about it, we see 5 different ways to answer to this change. First way, do nothing. And I won't elaborate much more on this one. Then second possibility for a mobile operator is to say, okay, I need to support the technology. So I'm going to buy an eSIM platform, I'm going to buy an SMDP Plus, and I'm going to align my existing processes with eSIM as much as possible, doing the minimum possible changes on my backend to be able to say that, okay, I support eSIM. So this is what we call being technically ready for eSIM, but it's not being ready for eSIM use cases, and it's especially not being ready for the eSIM-only smartphones. Then the next step in the maturity is to say, how can I take this opportunity to streamline my backend processes and reduce my cost? So of course, eSIM gets rid of the physical inventory, which amazing opportunity to reduce cost in terms of logistics, distribution, stock, management of technology evolution, obsolescence, etc. Physical inventory gone, but it's actually replaced by a digital inventory, which is made of digital SKUs, SKUs standing for stock keeping units. And what we see on the field, because real life conditions are complex, are diverse, because digital SKUs are very versatile, easy to create, and etc. What we see is a trend of the such number of SKUs to grow exponentially. So the key here, to stay in control of your operations, to stay in control of the cost of your operations, is keep it simple. And the challenge, therefore, is to meet all the different real-life conditions in the best way while keeping the number of digital SKUs as low as possible. Then the next possible level is to say, okay, eSIM is there, it's going to impact use cases. So I'm going to acknowledge the fact that eSIM is changing the way connectivity is distributed. It's more fluid, it's more immediate. And those players, those connectivity providers, what they usually do is that they rethink everything from scratch. So they review all the existing use cases and they see what eSIM changes for them. They implement new use cases, some of the ones we saw before, full digital and immediate onboarding, travel, try and buy, more connected devices, marketing campaign, enterprise. And each and every of those use cases is actually an opportunity for a new revenue stream and also an opportunity to cultivate the brand, a digital brand. What those players do also is that they usually rethink their distribution channel, because this is very much linked to eSIM. We will see more of that later. And so at the end of the day, it's all about having the right user experience as smooth as possible and also well adapted to each different target situation. And to associate your brand to new, smooth, innovative use cases. And so going further on the brand topic, and that's the fifth way to react. The fifth one is to say, okay, I'm going to take a full digital marketing positioning. I'm going to push this brand logic all the way. And this is the option to create a digital brand. And in the market, this is happening in two different ways. So we see new connectivity players, new brands. Example, travel business, Airalo, UBG, Celitech, etc. Fintechs, Revolut, Western Union, Monobank, Nubank, Nomad, all those banking players, they have launched eSIM-based connectivity services. You also have players like NordVPN that launched an eSIM service with Sail. So on that trend, I think eSIM-Go customers are very good examples of those future new connectivity providers, and I guess Mitch will elaborate on that. The second thing we see in the market is we see traditional mobile operators building sub-brands with specific digital value proposition. So very similar to what happened in the banking industry a few years ago. Those new brands, they usually don't exclusively rely on eSIM yet, but eSIM is a great add-on to a more global digital value proposition. And here I would quote Visible by Verizon. I would quote VZ by Digicel. So, as a conclusion, you may have heard many times about an eSIM revolution, and I've seen nothing concrete. You may be thinking it won't change anything for you. It will. The eSIM evolution is underway. It's gradually changing the end user experience, the usages, and the expectation. And we believe we shall all rethink existing and new use cases at the light of eSIM and evolve them. So it's not too late, but it's a significant transformation, and we do recommend starting as soon as possible. So that's it for me for now. I need it back over to you, Mohit.
Thanks, Sylvain, for that insightful presentation. And now, finally, it's my pleasure to invite Mish from eSIM-Go to talk about how eSIM-Go is making it easy to provide digital connectivity solutions.
Amazing. Thank you, gentlemen, for both your insights, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. As mentioned, I'm Mitch. I'm from eSIM-Go, and at eSIM-Go, what we're all about is trying to make anyone who wants to offer mobile connectivity to their customers or go create new mobile businesses, allowing them to enter the market with the minimal barriers possible. And where we sit, we see eSIM as a huge catalyst for change and disrupting the connectivity market. Right now, we have worked very heavily within the travel eSIM space, but we are now moving into more domestic propositions, so more traditional MVNOs. We recently launched with Vodafone in the UK, and we have a long list of other European and other global mobile operators looking to work with us. Mate, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. So before we go into why I think eSIM is that huge disruption and catalyst for change, I think it's important that we look at some other similar areas which have been disrupted recently. Sylvain has hit on the digital banking revolution, which came about 10 years ago with PSD2 being introduced. And we've gradually seen most banking services for day-to-day consumers go from your normal brick and mortar service into a digital service. And the reason why we have so many of these digital services and neobanks now is because of a catalyst and then a layer 2 enabler, enabling them to enter the market very, very easily. And the layer 2 example here is Plaid, who is sort of the backbone for a lot of these services. If we move on to an industry we should all know, which is CPaaS. So how has digital communications been transformed and enabled brands such as Uber, Grab, WhatsApp to enter the market? The reality is here, it comes down to advancements in SMPP and VoIP capabilities, which was capitalized by the likes of Twilio, Bird, Cinch, you name them, there's loads of them. That market's been consolidated now. But these layer 2 enablers have really enabled the big consumer brands to go and change the way that we do day-to-day stuff, whether that's ordering a taxi, staying in accommodation, or even communicating, replacing SMS. And then that brings us on to mobile subscriptions. And there's always been MVNOs for travel. There's always been MVNOs for domestic propositions. But it's always been really, really difficult for these new entrants to come to the market. Not because they don't have the money or anything like that. It's because it's very complicated. Not only do you have to worry about a lot of mobile stuff, which I'll come on to on the next slide, but it's also around how do they actually integrate with the mobile operator and distribute the SIM card, which is needed in order to provide the mobile service. And this is where eSIM comes in. And obviously I'm using eSIM Go as the layer 2 enabler here. But effectively, the digitization of getting that SIM card from the mobile operator, even if it's via a B brand, a mobile sponsored MVNO, or a Lufthansa, a Booking.com, a Western Union, is the distribution then becomes seamless and instant. Mohit's very kindly hit on that the eSIM technology penetration is going up and to the right. Having this conversation 5 years ago when we just started eSIM Go, I had to explain a lot of time what an eSIM is. Now there is certainly more awareness in the more advanced markets within Western Europe, North America, and we're seeing this come thick and fast everywhere else. And some of the concepts that we've been using within the travel space to provide travel eSIMs, we are now progressing them into domestic. So the same mechanisms and the same reasons why these brands want to enter the travel eSIM space are applicable when you start talking around domestic. And obviously, when you have a domestic proposition, we then end up having a much more stickier value proposition for the consumer. Next slide, Mohit. And the problem for the brands that want to enter this space is generally getting connectivity is expensive and time consuming. Dealing with mobile operators can be painful, especially when you're trying to launch an MVNO. On top of that, they have very complicated technology decisions to make, whether that's developing their own mobile core, how do they get the SIMs to the consumer, how do they bill? Not only that, there's a financial burden. Sorry, Mohit, if we could just skip 2 more along. And 1 more, sorry, yeah. There's a huge financial burden for them to enter the market, generally millions of dollars worth of commitments. And then the mobile operator will charge them in mobile operator terms per megabyte, per IMSI, per MISDN, a license fee for an HSS. Brands don't know what these are, and they can't actually productize them effectively. And the other aspect here is the ability to make a customer-centric digital solution is very challenging. With most MVNOs relying on very limited APIs and webhooks in order to build on. So the solution to all of this is either very in-depth wholesale APIs. And Mohit, if we could just skip to the next slide, please. So wholesale APIs, where brands who want to go and own the end customer relationship, build that whole end-to-end service minus the connectivity, they can build on this and create their own value proposition. And Nomad is one of our example customers. But what we find is with brands who want to enter the space with large consumer bases, they struggle to build because they already have their bread and butter services to develop, whether that's an airline, for example, like Lufthansa. So if you skip to the next slide, Mohit. So whether it's a Lufthansa not being able to build an eSIM store, so they would like a fully customizable customer experience that looks and feels like Lufthansa, but having a third-party enabler, a layer 2 enabler like us, come in and build that for them. And then the last option is around a generic affiliate solution, which is even quicker to go to market. You're talking a couple of days rather than a couple of weeks, but with limited branding. But with this instance, what brands are trying to do is they're trying to either provide extra value for their consumer, reward with a discount or free proposition, or defend market position. And that's it from me. Back over to Mohit.
Thanks, gentlemen. And after the presentation from the panelists, now it is time to move to the second part of the webinar, which is a panel discussion. So we heard the views of the panelists, and in this section, we'll go and discuss the views in greater detail. And in the meantime, I would really like to remind the participants, if you have any question, please do ask it in the chat box down below. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, just kicking off the panel discussion, and to my mind, one of the use cases of eSIM is roaming or travel. So, how is eSIM transforming the roaming landscape? And I would start with some of the statistics around this. So, if we look at in 2023, there were around 1.2 billion international trips that were made across the globe by different people. We estimate at Counterpoint that 46 million profile downloads happened in 2023, but this number is nothing and it is going to explode to over 300 million by 2030. So, but even at these numbers, at 46 million downloads in 2023, if you look at the travel SIM, eSIM, that's less than 4% of the total roaming market, where it's the local physical SIM that are dominating the market. So, and by 2030, the travel eSIM revenues will cross $3 billion. So what I'm trying to get onto is that this is a huge market for many people. eSIM, first time that their experience is on travel, and again, when Sylvain, you were also talking about these numbers, you were also talking about travel and new players coming in. So can you also talk a little bit more about the opportunity that is there, and how do you see the new players arriving in this space?
Yes. So as for the new players, there are plenty of them. A lot of new players positioning themselves of different size. And by the way, possibly at some point there will be consolidation. And on the adoption, I think you said it, this is only the beginning. So it's small in absolute value, but it's exponential in growth for all the past years. And especially the post-COVID has been amazing. So it's really accelerating in an impressive way. And for sure, eSIM has already started to change the roaming market, but it's only just the beginning. And eSIM will change the roaming market because for the end user, it's going to be much easier to get local connectivity. So it will have impact on the prices, and we put that on the slide. Prices will have to go down in the roaming prices because it's a new competition to the roaming prices. You also have to look at the fact that the end user will purchase the connectivity in different places. Now you can purchase your connectivity at home when you're buying your plane tickets or your hotel room, or during your trip, or at the airport just upon arrival. So maybe you will buy it with different players. And Mitch mentioned Lufthansa, Booking.com. Yeah, all those players around travel are positioning themselves.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the prices going down, and that reminds me of a recent trip that I made to Hong Kong. And I think the brand loyalty is not there so much now. So I instead of going with my favorite Aerialo that I used to download the eSIM earlier from, I just searched for the cheapest one out there, and I don't even remember the name of the company I downloaded the eSIM from. So yes, the prices are decreasing, but it is also, there is a fear in the market that it can lead to commoditization. So uh, any thoughts from you, Mish, in that respect, or
Yeah,
overall on this market?
yeah. I mean, obviously, where I sit within the market, we've spent a lot of time onboarding and enabling a lot of these new challenges to enter the market. So we have over 400 partners who are consuming our wholesale API, and their whole business model is just to sell eSIMs to make money. And that has inevitably meant that the price that the consumer pays has decreased because of all the extra competition. And we think that's a good thing at eSIM Go because consumers are getting better value. But when we talk about prices, and obviously some mobile operators might think about this as a negative, i.e. my inbound roaming is going to decrease because I'm being squeezed by more buying power. But actually what we find is we work directly with a number of mobile operators as eSIM Go, directly working with the MNO, and we can roam into their network, and we're their only sort of way into that eSIM space. Because we're offering a much more cost-effective way for that consumer to come and utilize their network when they're inbound roaming, actually what we find is the amount of data that consumers are using is tripling, quadrupling, going up and to the right exponentially. And they're making more money because historically they would have to sell that roaming capability to another mobile operator who might then put on 1,000% markup. And that then results for the inbound roaming mobile operator challenges around silent roamers, i.e. someone coming from the UK going into the US and deciding to turn data roaming off, and I don't use my SIM, I just rely on Wi-Fi. So actually we're unlocking new revenue streams too. It's not just about, oh, we're going to make roaming more competitive. Yes, but everything else is going up and to the right.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe it will lower the cost also because now operators are using other channels, the unconventional channels. They are trying up with companies like Lufthansa, you mentioned, or Booking.com, uh, to to reach out to customers that they were not able to reach earlier. So overall, it could be revenue positive. In fact, in the morning when we were having our earlier webinar, there was a question around it that is roaming dead? And I mean, it's difficult. I mean, Mish, would you like to comment on that?
I don't think roaming is dead. Obviously, you have varying perspectives as a mobile operator. Mobile operators tend to fit into a net sender of roaming traffic or a net receiver. And obviously, the strategy that they have will be different. But imagine you're a small mobile operator. We work with MTEL Mauritius. We build one of their outbound roaming propositions. They can't go and do a big deal with Vodafone because they don't have the buying capacity. So they're using a third party to enable their customers to roam. But they're still making money from roaming. In fact, their customers are utilizing more roaming than they probably did in the past because they can now afford to. So I think it's just a catalyst for more people to utilize roaming when historically they would have sat there silent, not spending money.
Got it. So that brings to the other question, which is, and this is something that Sylvain, you also alluded to, and maybe you can answer this more in detail. So, what strategies should the mobile operators adopt to optimize the backend systems for eSIM? So, what is it that they can do?
Yeah, so eSIM is a digital transformation of the use cases and of the backend. So I think the mobile operators, the connectivity providers, should really face it as a complete digital transformation, and as much as possible start from a white page. So start from scratch, and think about all the different aspects, the security, the scalability, training your teams, of rethink your logistics, and even the absence of logistics somewhere, or how you're going to manage the digital part of it, the new part of it. Of course, look at the use case in each and every detail and address the nominal use case, but also all the different huge edge cases and error cases. And we're talking a lot about roaming and prices and etc. But one key aspect when roaming and in all and each and every of the eSIM new use cases will be the quality of the user experience. It will have to be perfect. It will have to be the right thing at the right time and as smooth as possible user experience. So start from scratch. And while you think all of this, keep it as simple as possible to stay in control of your cost, of your backend systems, and to really focus on the end user experience, which will allow you to innovate and to make a difference, and not having to. So that's a way to reduce your costs and to keep a price tag and a good reason for this price tag.
Yeah, and completely agree with you that good user experience is key. Because users want to when they're using eSIM, they want the experience to be as seamless as possible, as close to a physical SIM. I mean, I won't say as close to as a physical SIM, but same at par with the physical SIM. And to my mind, it is also important that when operators are looking at their strategy, they need to look at it from 5 years hence perspective. They need to make those systems that are scalable and reliable. They need to look for these kind of solutions. They need to invest in inventory management as well as analytical tools, because that will be very critical for the success yeah, going forward. And Mish, in your experience, when you are dealing in these situations, what is it? What is your advice that is there for the service providers?
For the service providers who are trying to go and build a good digital experience for a consumer, it all comes about having the most stable back end and set of APIs and webhooks to allow you to go and create the best digital journey. But not only that, but how can we utilize the advanced back end systems to be able to go and automate expensive tasks such as customer support? The good thing about an eSIM is because you're distributing it digitally, you can then take some of the traditional expensive areas of mobile operators world, such as support, and put it into a digital channel where you can automate 95% of the support tickets. That would be my advice.
Yep. And in your experience, does the support required for eSIM much far higher than the normal SIM? What has been your experience in that area so far?
It's different. So it has changed a lot over the last 2 to 3 years in terms of the tickets that we get when we manage the front end and tier one support for our customers. People are getting more aware of how to install eSIMs, and Apple well, in particularly Apple, they've done a great job with Apple Universal Link and been able to directly install an eSIM by clicking a link. As opposed to having to scan a QR code, which is obviously a challenge if the QR code is on your phone and you're trying to scan it, you just can't do it. It's a manual copy and paste. So really that's the main difference. The good thing about having an eSIM as opposed to a physical SIM is you're getting a lot more data about that SIM easily accessible via the webhooks available to you as a mobile operator or as a service provider like eSIM Go. It allows you to then do a lot more stuff, whereas with a normal SIM card, generally it's a lot harder to access.
Okay, thanks. And that brings me to the final question of the panel discussion, which is how does eSIM open up new distribution channels for customer engagement? Maybe Sylvain, if you can give some thoughts around that.
Yeah, well, I think eSIM is different than the traditional SIM, and I think it's will make things different. It will make things better in two ways. In the back end, and we mentioned that a lot, more data points, more analytics. You can also much easily get rid of obsolescence, and also in the distribution. And we're here on the distribution channels. eSIM is an opportunity to get connectivity anytime and anywhere. That's for the end user. And eSIM is an opportunity for connectivity providers to sell connectivity anytime and anywhere. So there are plenty of new possible media maybe to get to a base and sell connectivity. And in plenty of those cases, the traditional mobile operators may not be the most valid brand to sell. So that's where partnership, new distribution channels are needed. Be at the right place, at the right time, with the right partner, and the right user experience. This will be key to get customer engagement and then get much more connectivity and much more use of different connectivity options. Mitch, which was mentioning the silent roamer. So remove the silent roamer. That's the most obvious example. But then you can boost the use of connectivity data in different cases, thanks to all those different strategies.
All right. And Mitch, in your experience, how can operators be looking at increased engagement opportunities with eSIM?
Well, it does come down to thinking outside the box in terms of why would a consumer switch? And ultimately, every mobile operator wants to obtain more subscribers, whether that's through direct channels or through indirect channels via MVNOs or MVNEs like us. And it's about working with brands, in my view anyway, and my experience, brands who value customers and want to give them more value. And obviously mobile is something very, very easy for them to bundle in to a proposition. Now imagine you're flying from Munich to New York, flying on Lufthansa. and they were to give you a 5 GB free eSIM because you've ticked over 10,000 miles and more points or whatever loyalty scheme you're working on, that sort of micro redemption feeling and delivering a truly valuable piece of real estate to that subscriber or customer is one of the easiest ways to obtain a new subscriber base without having to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on acquisition.
Right. And we didn't discuss that, but if we look at, there are ARPU enhancement opportunities that are there for the operators when they are going in for eSIM. So one is through these engagements, different engagements that are there. The second thing is companion devices. Again, the more they are able to offer, the more connectivity they are able to offer, the higher is the ARPU. So those opportunities are also there.
The higher the ARPU and the higher the stickiness also. And both
Stickiness
example.
is also,
Yeah.
so that's
Absolutely.
another, the
Yeah.
retention, and that's the
Yeah.
holy grail for any operator, that getting the stickiness. So yes, that's a pretty insightful discussion that we had. So thanks, Sylvain and Mish, for this insightful discussion. It's inspiring to see the diverse use cases such as travel, try and buy, companion devices that eSIM can enable, and the significant opportunities that it presents for the operators. So as we move forward, it will be crucial for the operators to keep strategizing and evaluating their backend eSIM infrastructure. And I emphasize on the word keep, keep evaluating, because it is not a one-time thing. They need to continuously keep evaluating and improving upon it. And equally important is that they integrate the infrastructure seamlessly with the other systems that they have, which is the OSS BSS systems, to unlock the full potential. And the advent of eSIM and the cloud definitely is making possible for the MVNOs to launch their services, as Mitch mentioned, at a very fraction of the cost compared to traditional methods. So with that, I would like to open the floor for questions. Please use the Q&A or the chat button to ask questions. And I see that there are already a few questions that are here. But everyone, if you have any question, please do type in your question. So the first question here is from Ray. So how is eSIM capability adoption expanding outside of the iPhone or the iOS? At what rate are Android devices adopting eSIM capability? eSIM only outlook for Android devices. So
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Mohit.
yes, Sylvain. No, I'll add from my perspective. Why don't you answer this?
Okay, so thanks, Mike. Yeah, so maybe on my side, I won't be giving numbers. Maybe I'll leave that to you. But more on the qualitative standpoint, we see a lot of movement on the Android market. We see a willingness to work on the user experience. Android has improved the LPA significantly in the past. The LPA is the application on the device that manages the eSIM. Android has been tackling the device change use case in a much more comprehensive and smoother way than before. And also in terms of devices, we see eSIM arriving more and more on middle range devices, on middle range devices. So eSIM used to be only in high-end devices, and this is changing now thanks to the Android market. So we see it arriving in Samsung mid-range and in also some Chinese manufacturer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was about to add also, that if you look at, there was a 12% growth in the consumer devices last year. A bulk of that was driven by Android devices, and that's because in terms of the price points, they are coming down. So not only Samsung, but then there are smaller, or I won't say smaller brands, but a more Chinese brand like Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi, they have also been getting their eSIM in lower price points. So overall, I think for it to become mass market, Android is the key. Okay, then uh, another question that is there is, does the expansion of temporary use cases that eSIM facilitates require mobile operators to think differently about the allocation and consumption of their IMSI and other resources?
Okay, do
So
you want me to take this?
Yeah,
Sure.
please go for it, Mitch. Yeah.
So it's a really good question. And the reality is, because most of the temporary use cases, they are primarily for a short period of time, you're talking less than 12 months. Most mobile operators that we partner with anyway, basically have a very similar reclamation strategy as they would do with a prepay SIM card. So, i.e., if there's been no activity after X period, they reclaim the IMSI, they reclaim the MISDN if there is indeed one associated to the SIM. Obviously, for a data-only proposition, you don't have to have a MISDN associated. So really, it just comes down to the life cycle requirements for that particular MNO. For us, where we sit, generally we keep the eSIM active for 12 months after the last paid for usage, because we do see customers come back and top up. Obviously, when we're dealing with travel eSIM solutions, people aren't traveling every week. Most people will travel once, maybe twice a year. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, with that 12 months is generally fine for most mobile operators.
So, Mitch, does that lead to an increase in the cost for the operator in that case? Because if there are more and more resources or IMSI needs to be used.
So there's actually no real cost as per se for the IMSI. There might be licensing aspects to this, whether that's an eSIM licensing fee or a HLI HSS license, but generally they're relatively small charges. So depending on the mobile operator, again, it's generally like a rounding error, and especially if you're talking about a 12-month period, you can even have that down to 3 months or whatever, depending on the commercial constraints.
You're right.
Maybe
And I would,
yeah, if I may,
sure.
Mohit, on this one, I think what it requires is to identify those use cases and plan them well in advance, and also to have the right technology behind to manage them. On the IMSI usage, for example, there's something quite typical, which is the post-allocation of the IMSI, which is improving significantly the use of HLR and IMSI, especially on bigger federal states, for example. And with eSIM, this post-allocation, on physical SIM, the post-allocation used to be done over the air with what we call an OTA platform. With eSIM, you can do it, on your system before downloading the eSIM. This is a great possibility, and that's one great example where eSIM is different than physical SIM. It's much better. Now, mobile operators need to plan this, need to have the tools to use this, and they can really address all those different new use cases in a much more efficient way.
Right. And there is one more question. And before I take this question, I would request all the participants, if there is any question, please do put in over here. So we have one more question, which is what should mobile operators prioritize when building backend systems for eSIM? So Sylvain, can you take that?
Yeah, so maybe if I take it. So what they should prioritize is involve everyone in the company. And that's why we often advise to, if you don't feel comfortable, start small. Start with a sub-brand, a minor use case, then you will evolve. But take this completely, comprehensively. So look at it from the security standpoint and include the security company. Look at it from the change management, customer service, and train all those teams, involve them, the billing system, the fraud management, etc., and see how they are all impacted to it, and take this opportunity to educate them, to educate your whole company on a very practical use case, and be ready to scale. So have a solution that will address well all those small different use cases, but will scale well, because those small use cases will become big very quickly. So that would be my advice.
I have a practical example of that. I'm currently working with a European mobile operator who does not have a very big enterprise customer base. They're primarily consumer focused and heavily reliant on their prepaid customer base, and they're trying to enter the enterprise space and serve more SMBs. So they're utilizing eSIM technology to be able to go and provide try before you buy aspects to these SMBs and enterprises, so they can validate the quality of the proposition, because a lot of the people they're speaking to have never used their service before. And that's like a very small MVP one of getting their feet under the eSIM table.
Yeah, right. So we are coming almost towards the end of the webinar. One last question that has come in is how do you envision eSIM adoption impacting competition between MNOs and the MVNOs?
Well, I haven't got enough time of 3 minutes, but generally speaking, most mobile operators that I work with love working with MVNOs because they see them as a way in order to be able to obtain subscriber base without taking on all the costs associated to that, whether that's acquiring the customer or supporting the customer. So depending on, I guess, where that mobile operator sits within the market, they might give you a slightly different answer. But on the whole, generally, when we start talking about eSIMs and enabling more MVNOs, most mobile operators are aware that, yes, although it might change the way that they deal with consumers directly, the underlying benefit for them is more subscribers because they can easily switch to their network.
Yeah, and what I also think, and maybe Sylvain, you can add to that as well. Uh, with the advent of MVNOs and the digital brands that are being launched completely digital life cycle management, I think the pressure is also on the MNOs to improve their services. So overall, more competition is definitely there, but it's working out to the advantage for the entire ecosystem. So Sylvain, any last thoughts from you on it?
Yeah, I think MNOs have a great asset, which is their brands. You know, the MNO brands are very much well known in our daily lives everywhere. So this is a great asset they can rely upon. But yes, you will need to acknowledge that the market is going to change, that you're going to compete with different players and take the right actions here to keep leveraging on that brand.
Right. So we are almost to the hour. So coming to an end. So thank you everyone for joining us. But this is the start of the conversation. Uh, this is the start of the conversation, and please feel free to reach out to Sylvain, Mish, or myself for any question that you might have. Please take a note of the email IDs. They are there on the screen right now. And do feel free to reach out to us any question that you might have even after the webinar. And one more thing, we'll be sharing the recording of the webinar and the white paper on this topic next week as an appreciation of your joining our webinar. So thank you everyone and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.